Deena Von Yokes here from Von Savvy Hair Academy. Today, I'm going to share with you a method in hair cutting, and it's called Hair Metrics 360. In fact, this method was passed down to me by my mother, who's been in the industry over 50 years. And what it is a method that is elevation, over direction, finger angle are the three movements, and two angles that we use, 90s, 45s. In this haircut, I'll be doing pie-shaped parting. I will be pointing out the 90s and the 45s. So elevation is an up and down movement, over direction, side to side, finger angles in and out. We do these three movements, whether we like it or not, every time we cut hair. So if we could be on purpose with what we're doing with our finger angle, elevation, and over direction, we can create a predictable hair design every single time, whether you do the same technique and a shorter or longer version. At the end of the day, what creates success is consistency. And this is a technique that you can reproduce the same haircut. If you've had those clients that come in and say, I love your last haircut. And some of the times you're like, oh boy, I don't remember what I did. This method, you will be able to repeat what you did previously and be on purpose through every haircut and have success due to consistency. So I'm gonna get started. And my first finger angle is going to be 90. The direction of the hair, I'm pulling down 90, so I'm not over directing it this way or that way. I'm directing it straight down from where the hair grows. And my finger angle is going to be 90. So the over direction, there is none, it's straight down. And if there is anything, it's a 90. Finger angle is 90. And I'm only elevating one finger's elevation. So that's your elevation, over direction, finger angle. And I will talk to you about this every single haircut I do. So the first section is one finger's elevation to the skin, finger angle 90. And I'm not over directing it left or right. I'm just bringing it straight down from where the hair grows. No there, no there. If we over direct it forward, it falls back. If we over direct it back, it falls forward. So we can dictate where we want the hair to move and how we want to create movement in the hair. I'm going to do this in two sections. I think it's really important when you're first learning to subdivide as much as possible. If you cannot see your guide, then you need to take smaller sections. I'm cutting it right. I'll go back and cut that corner, and everything's going straight back at a 90. I'm not traveling around the neck or the head shape. I'm bringing everything back. And today it's going to be a disconnected haircut. So there's your first section, and that's your right side. Now I'm going to go to the left side and duplicate the exact same thing. So that's our first section. You want to take a piece from the right section to use as your guide to use over into the left section. And I'm standing away from my work, but normally you want to stand right in front of your work. And it's a little tricky to see your angles. When you stand in front of your work, you can see where the hair is falling much better. And I will take a second and check my work before I move further. I'm gonna steal a clippy from the front because it's getting in the way. So one finger's elevation from the neck. I'm not over directing. I'm bringing everything back to a 90. And I'm cutting it off at a 90. The last section, I chose to cut this in two sections for this video. Now I'm connecting the right to the left, one finger's elevation, no over direction, and finger angle is a 90. And you cut it right to that previous perimeter, not into it and not below it. And this enables the hair, once it dries, it'll swell and stack and be a beautiful shape that everyone's going to notice from across the room. So that's the foundation that we cut in, and now I'm going to go into the interior layers. So I'm going to go from the center elevating straight out at a 90. I'm gonna go off the top of my fingers so you can see. My finger angle is 90, and I'm directing it straight over the section. I'm not directing it left or right. Start from the center and make my way over to the right side. Cut the hair off at a 90. And you use your previous section. So you take section 1 and bring it over into section 2, section 2 over into section 3, section 3 over into section 4, and that will give you your guide when it's determining the length. 90-degree finger angle. I'm bringing the hair straight out over the section at a 90. And now the corner I'm bringing back to that 4th cutting position. So section number 5, I brought back to 4 and cut it off at a 90 so that we leave weight over in the corner. If you follow it around, you'll cut that out too short. So now we're going back into the center, and I'm going to travel to the left. So you can clearly see that's the 90-degree finger angle. If I was standing in front of it, I could, be able to move a little smoother, but I'm gonna stand off the side so that I can let you see. So section 1 goes into section 2 as a guide, and if you get real close, you can see the guides right here. There's your 90. And then section 3, where is that 3? This is 3. This side of the doll head has less hair. Section 4, and then what do we do after section 4? We bring section 5 back to it, so we leave length in the corner. There's what's called the mastoid process, which is the hair that's between the hairline and the ear. If you cut into that, it'll cause it to be too short. You want to leave the weight in the corner because if you keep traveling with it, it'll cut it out and make it too short. So I'm bringing section 5 back to section 4. I'm cutting off the top of my hand so that you can see, but normally I would be cutting palm to palm. And there's my guide. So you can see even weight distribution from left to right. And now it's an interior layer, and we're gonna dry this and bring the top over it and cut that section next. Now we're back to step 1. And we did the perimeter and then the interior layers. Again, everything you do is elevation over direction and finger angle. Why is the question I get asked all the time. When I do this particular haircut, I can repeat it and I can duplicate it. So if my client comes back in, I can be consistent with my work and I can live up to their expectations. Because how many of us have had those clients that say, oh my gosh, I loved my last haircut. And then you think to yourself, what the hell did I do? So in this case, you can duplicate your work. And not only that, I did this in a variation. It's a long variation. This can be done in medium length and way shorter. So I'm just giving an example of a long variation. And then anything from there, you can go shorter, shorter, shorter. But this is the bottom section. It's from the bevel down to the nape of the neck. I cut it to the hairline, 1 finger's elevation, no over direction. And what I want to do after this is go in and texturize the top weight of the hair. So whenever you elevate out like this and you drop it, it creates a little bit of a corner. So if you want that to become seamless, you can slide cut. And there's so many different textures that you can create just with your scissors. You don't really need the thinning shears. You don't really need texture. You don't need slide, but I'm pretty sure whatever I want to create, I'm going to create it with the scissors that I have in my hand if I don't have other tools with me. So the fun part is to be able to learn to use your scissors as any kind of texture that you want to create. So today we did a little slide cutting, and I want everyone to think about when you're taking weight off the top, what is this doing? You want to think about what you're trying to create. What I'm trying to create is I want it to be flatter, smoother, without so much bulk. So once I lay this hair over it, it's not a triangle shape, it's more of a smoother, softer shape. So what I would like to talk about here too, that is added to elevation, over direction, finger angle, and then the two basic angles are 90s and 45s. I also want to point out we're cutting straight lines on a round object. So I utilize a pattern on the head, and I consider this a circle, and then through the circle you have your 90s, and you have the distance between the two 90s, which is your 45s. This pattern can be placed on any part of the head, but I understand the way that my brain works at this point because of being trained this way as I see a pattern. So we're cutting straight lines on a round object. So I do pie-shaped partings in this particular haircut, and I am now going into the second section, and we are going to bring that hair right to the previous hair that I just blew dry. And what happens is when you bring hair all to one spot and cut it off, I want to discuss what that creates, because it's important when you start off in your haircut, what is it that's your plan and what is it that you want to create as an end result. So as an end result, I want to create weight through the perimeter. And in this particular case, I'm going to pretend that my client has thin, fine hair. So when they have thin, fine hair, you want to put more weight into it. You want to be careful not to over layer it, because it'll make the foundation really sparse. So that is the first section. And every section after that I'm bringing there, because each section that I bring down is going to create more and more weight, which is also going to create a beautiful shape. And this is perfect for really fine textured hair. So now I'm pulling down the next section. I did a pie-shaped parting, and if you notice through the whole entire haircut, I've done pie-shaped partings. So I'm going into my second section. It's good to subdivide. Start from the center back and make your way over to the corner. And I cut to that line, not into it, not below it, right on it. Whereas an end result, we're gonna have more of a paintbrush effect, where everything's brought to this clean, beautiful, blunt line. And when you run out of the perimeter, you go off that last strand. So at this point, I'm running out of what would be a guide. Now my new guide is just with this hair is going off that last strand, and that determines the length and where I'm gonna cut it. So that's your right side. Subdivide going down the center on the left. One finger's elevation. I'm still consistent, very consistent with my elevation, over direction, finger angle, all the way through the haircut. And as consistent as you are, is as consistent and as beautiful as the end result's gonna be. Sloppy work, sloppy haircut. Sometimes that's in, but right now that's not what I'm creating. Now I'm going off the last strand like I did on the other side as my guide. So now you're seeing more weight. You're gonna see more weight through the perimeter of the hair, and look how much shape that is. It's getting cleaner and cleaner. Now I'm going into section 3, pie-shaped parting, bringing everything back. So I'm going back to the center, and if you notice, I'm repeating over and over each section. And that's going back to repetition is the mother of skill. You become a master at something that you do over and over and over. And when you've done something over and over and over, you also build confidence. And with that confidence becomes a full clientele, because once you're confident at what you do, people pick up on it. If you're scared and you don't know where to start and where to stop and what your plan is and what you're doing, so it's coming back to Hair Metrics 360 is a method in cutting hair that helps you be unlimited in your creativity. And if you continue to have a plan and stick to the plan, your end results are more predictable. And if you can call your elevation, your overdirection, your finger angle, then you can predict the end result time after time after time. And you'd be surprised. Some people would say, well, I don't cut every person the same. You don't have to. This is the foundation to so many other hair designs. It's not like you just do this one haircut and you're learning a haircut. You're learning a method in hair cutting. And as long as you can call your finger angle, your elevation, your overdirection, and what angles you're using, if you're using a 90 or a 45, and elevation, overdirection, and finger angle, all of those can be 90s and 45s. So if you notice down here, we're cutting it at a 90. But if you want it to graduate to the front, you can cut it at a 45, and that's going to make it longer to the front. If you do an outward 45, that would make it shorter to the front and longer to the back. So you create movement by dictating what you're going to do with your finger angle. So that's one finger's elevation, 90-degree finger angle, no overdirection. I'm directing everything back to the 90 and cutting it off. It's what you could call a standing still bob, because everything, even the corners brought back here, and everything's cut off at a 90. I like to demonstrate when we're connecting. We just finished the back, correct? Now we're going on to the side. So I have a method to the way that I move around the head so that I'm in an organized manner. I'm not just picking hair up and cutting it off. There's a reason when I pick it up and when I cut it off. So the pattern that I was talking about earlier is 90s point out the widest part of the head, and 45 is the distance between the two 90s. So I'm going to show you an example. It doesn't matter if I'm on the side of the head, or if I'm on the back of the head, or if I'm on the top of the head, or if I'm in the front. This pattern is in my head naturally because of how I was trained. And this points out usually the widest point of the head. So if you think about it, it's front to back, side to side. This is where the head is the widest. And then after you understand your 90s, then the distance between the two of them is a 45. So you notice these are our diagonals too, which is, we do diagonals in hair cutting. But we also want to see that these are the corners, so people have a tendency to not know where their corners are, and this helps you understand where the corners are, whether you want to keep the weight in the corners or take the weight out, but you want to understand when you're in the corners. So if you shoot an asmus across the head, this is where your corners are. And I'm very visual, so when I was given this example, the corners are here and they're back there. When I got this as an example, it was an aha moment for me as a hair designer, but more of an artist than a technical person. This helped me as an artist connect with my technical. And if you can take your technical and your creative and put those together, you can be off the charts as a hair designer. Now we're doing pie-shaped parting also, like we did in the back. We're cutting a straight line, obviously on a round object, but this is what helps me know where my lines are and where the hair's coming from. So what I like to do is take a piece from the back. Now at this point, your finger angle could be 90, your finger angle could be a downward 45, your finger angle could be an upward 45. This is what you want to have a plan before you get started, what it is that you want to do and what the client wants as an end result. Is there going to be some tapering going on, or do they like the weight? Do they have a full face? Do they have a thin face? Do they have a heart-shaped face? So if they've got a really square face, I have a tendency not to square off the haircut. I would have a tendency to put more angles with that face to elongate it instead of squaring it. If their face is square and you cut a square haircut, you're putting square on square, which makes them look more square. So I like to put diagonals with people that have fuller faces. And people that have a longer face, I like to create more volume. So that's usually going into my layers and squaring off the bottom. Today, I'm sticking with my 90. And I'm bringing it right to that last section from the back. And that's determining my length for the front. And I like to do a subsection between the tip of your fingers and to that second knuckle is where you should stop. Shouldn't go too far in there. Right there, my little purple fingers. Now, section 2. Okay, I like to have the conversation here too, that you want to be aware of where your head shape is lying on your client. Are they lying forward? Are they upright? Are they tipped back? With the phones, cell phones these days, a lot of people are like that. And if I took my finger angle and made it a 90, look what happens. I would cut off the corner. I don't want to cut off the corner. That's not the intention. So you want to have their nose in an upright position. And then you truly are combing your hair down at a 90 and you're truly cutting it off at a 90. If they tip their head forward, you could adapt to the angle that they have forward, but I just have the client sit their head in an upright position and I stay aware of when they move and get on their cell phone, because that's what everybody does these days. And so then they start dropping like that. And then it makes my line through the side scruffy, and I don't like that. I like it to be nice and neat and tidy. Next section, pie shape parting. And I will have videos in my modules on my Von Savvy Academy online, because after I get done cutting hair, a lot of people want to know what I did with the color. I would like to talk about the color that we did on the mannequin today. And what it was a flash lift 40 volume from Redken. And on the outside, I did a few low lights. That was Shades EQ Cream Gloss at a 5 level. I wanted to create movement with light and dark. And once that was all finished, I went in with a berry color. This is what we do in our world. And I glossed it over so you see movement and through the hair of light dark with the berry shine at the end. And it's like a little berry cheesecake, chocolate cheesecake. The beauty of hair color is you can always lighten and darken, get it right where you want, and put a gloss or any kind of glaze or any kind of vivids over the top, and you're creating something amazing. Now, the key to this is if you don't see your previous guide, then you need to take smaller sections, but you can see I'm cutting it right to that previous. And the front of the hair, I'm bringing back to the side. I'm not traveling around and cutting it off like that. I want the corners, so my deal is to create the corners. I want the corners to be there. And you want to be really careful about getting too much hair in between your fingers. And that goes back to subsection if need be. I'm standing off to the side, so it's a little tricky to stand in front of my work. But now we're going off that last strand that's dictating the length in the front, because there's no longer a perimeter in this last section. How I determine the length is off of this last strand. I brought everything back and cut it off and kept my finger angle on 90. And that is the end of connecting the front to the back on the right side. And now we're going to go to the left side. So now this is a technique that creates more texture, and I'm in the mid shaft sliding out. And this is going to create the choppy bob. And I'm still doing it in an organized manner around the head. section by section. And my scissors are going in the center, slightly open and then sliding out. So it's not too close to the head and it's not too close to the ends. So what happens when you even do freestyle cutting, we're going to go in and texturize, and this is a little slide cutting. What happens is you still want a method. I'm going in the middle of the strand, my scissors are slightly open, and you flick your wrist. So your wrist is going like that basically, but not that extreme. And that takes out weight to build volume and also adds the texture that we were talking about. This is going to be a choppy bob, not a heavy one length bob. I brought nice shape in through the perimeter of the hair, and that's gonna allow the shape and the haircut and the hair design to last. And this is the interior layers where I was creating more of a choppy textured effect, which is very current and very edgy at the time. And it's something that, you know, it depends on the client's hair. They may not want all that bulk. They want it to be soft and more volume. And even if they do have a lot of hair, you can still texture and it won't go that full because they have heavier hair. So it depends on how much you texturize it, how little to how much. If you take more out, it's going to release the hair. When you release the hair, it expands and creates volume. And you're seeing now there's a cut beneath a cut. So this is the previous cut and this hair is sitting on the top. And so now it's not so triangle-y. It's more like it drops with a little texture sitting on top. So that is our beautiful textured bob. We're gonna go in and blow dry it now and show you the end result. Like my jacket says, art is truth. And there's art in coloring hair and cutting hair. And today, this is what happened.